Uh, Hello, Avanti. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So my first question is, who inspired you to pursue singing as a career? Who are your sources of inspiration?
Great question. I think what's more salient for me is why I started music, and part of that is because of my dad and my family in general. My dad plays the tabla in addition to being a technology entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and so I grew up with that kind of mahal at home. My mom's pretty spiritual, so I grew up singing, if that makes sense, and then I got into Indian classical and all of that. And my Guruji is really inspiring, so that's how I got into the path of doing that passionately. In terms of doing it professionally, I think it was just the realization that artists today have a platform that's much bigger than themselves
Yeah.
and just their singing voice. And so I think that was the real driving force behind it.
Yeah. So I think there's another question. Uh, this is from a fan of yours. So he asked, does having a classical bass give you any advantage over others? And if so, how?
I definitely think so. It's because you have a very strong foundation
Yeah.
that it's hard to have when you are just self-taught or if you're learning more contemporary styles. Because what any form of classical, whether it's Indian or Western or whatever it might be, um, they inculcate things like regular riyaz in practice. They inculcate things where you have to improvise in different ways. Your pitch has to be super on point. And so having those basic tools, I think, allows you to do anything else. Not to say that people who don't have classical backgrounds cannot be successful, but I do think that it helps because it makes you ready for many things.
Okay, amazing. So, what is the best advice you have been given by a singer or a musician?
Mm. The best advice I would say is to find your own unique sound and run with it. And that was given to me by Shreya Ghoshal actually when she came to Berkeley for a masterclass. I was doing a dual degree at the time. I remember we had to sing some of her songs, and she liked the way in which I sung it, but our voice textures are very different. And her advice to me was don't try to sing it the way I sung it, make it your own and
Yeah,
lean into your strengths, right? And that really stayed with me.
yeah, amazing. This is another fan question. So, what are some of the skills that young singers should learn that will help them in their singing career?
Number one, figuring out how to incorporate regular practice and riyaz into your routine. A lot of young singers think that they can just sing and they'll be fine, but that is really, really important. Making time to work on your craft. The second is if you want to make this into a career one day, learning about the music business and doing your research because both go hand in hand. I mean, there's so many talented people who don't get the opportunity sometimes because they are just not able to put themselves out there in the right way. So it's learning about both.
Yeah. So, so it is often said that music helps one to cope up with stress. We have learned that. So, how do you think that music affects mental health of an individual?
That's a great question. There's multiple benefits. One, for a lot of people, creating, engaging in, or listening to music can feel very therapeutic. For
Yeah.
me, I know it feels like an escape and a catharsis, but for a lot of people, listening to a song might cheer them up or change their mood when they're in, a kind of a glum state and vice versa. There's also been a lot of research that goes to show the power of music in healing and therapy. For example, the number of beats per minute in some kinds of songs can elicit a happier reaction, a more melancholy reaction, things like that. It has physiological effects. So there's a lot, and I feel like that's a field that is going to be explored so much more in the future because there is a huge need to understand how these art forms have that healing power and also um, can play a huge role.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, if you could change anything about our music industry in general, what would that? What would it be?
I would change it to be more collaborative. I feel
Yeah,
like there are way too many, um, you know, a lot of people feel, especially in India, because the independent music industry has to compete so much with the film industry that
yeah,
it feels like when some people have made it, that's about it. For the industry to really become a full-fledged industry, we need more and more people in it, and we need more and more people to support that. So whether that is nurturing young talent, or whether that is artists themselves being friendly with each other, collaborating with each other, I think there needs to be more of the collaborative spirit as opposed to the competitive spirit.
yeah, yeah. So you said about collaborations. If you could open a show for any artist, who will it be?
If I could open a show, any artist in the world,
Yeah, and any favorite artist.
anyone in the world, I would love to open for Taylor Swift. But that's definitely a while away if that ever happens.
Yeah. So this is another fan question. So he asked, which has been one of your best performances so far?
Mm. I think one of the ones that I'm missing the most right now is this was December of now I guess 2019 or 2018. Regardless, it was before the pandemic, and there
Yeah,
was this show in this area in Mumbai called Malad,
yeah,
and it was called Malar Masti, and it was essentially a festival celebrating different things, and just the energy of that crowd was amazing. There were 30,000 people there, and it was morning, by the way. It was 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. So I'm so surprised that Mumbaikars woke up at that time and were engaged. But I think, there's so many memorable ones for multiple reasons. But in this moment, I'm missing that because I'm just missing being on stage with people.
yeah. So did you notice any difference between the Western industry and our industry? And what is the main difference between the two? Like you have been to both industries and
Yeah.
as well.
The professionalization of the industries,
Okay. Yeah,
because in India right now, the way that the industry functions, you have a manager, but the manager plays like 20 roles,
yeah, yeah,
whereas in the US, because it's just a more formalized, professionalized industry, you have different people working on different things, you have more opportunities. So I think it's both. The industry itself needs to be act more professional, but also in society we need to professionalize music and the arts and entertainment, and the more we take them seriously as careers.
So do you think that the US industry is more flexible?
Flexible, I don't necessarily know. It depends on what you mean by flexible. I
Yeah,
think in terms of more options, potentially yes, where you don't just have to be an artist. There are so many different options in the industry, but again, that's because it's a bigger industry, it's more professional.
yeah. I think nowadays parents are very overprotective about their children pursuing a career in music. So, what advice would you give them to convince their parents to pursue this career?
No, that's a great question. I mean, my advice in general to convince parents of anything is to meet them where they are coming from. What I mean by that is most parents want to see you successful and happy and stable, which is why they don't encourage creative or non-traditional careers because उनको लगता है that you will not be as successful, right? You will not make as much money or whatever it might be. Um, so part of that is, what the industry needs to do. But part of that is when you convince them, it's about showing them the options that you have and showing them that you've thought this through. So doing your research, almost creating a business plan of sorts, right? Showing them that, hey, if I wanted to be an artist, here are my options, but I can also be in the music management, in the music and law space, in this space, in that space, and like showing all the optionalities and showing the professional side of the industry, I think is really important. And you have to love it. It can't be just this pipe dream where it's like, oh, it's cool, I want to do it because I don't know, I want to get fans or whatever. You
Yeah,
really have to love it also. It can't just be for the fame, because fame is not necessarily the outcome.
yeah,
Fame is a byproduct,
right.
right? But
Uh,
if you love what you're doing, you'll always be in that space.
yeah. So, like, Would you mind singing a few lines from your favorite album for our audience?
Sure,
Um,
sure. I can sing a few lines from one of my own songs, which I
yeah,
released a few months ago. It's called Sundolo, and it's a song about
yeah,
mental
that's my
health.
favorite song actually of yours. I keep
All
hearing
right.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That means a lot. एक बात कहनी थी पर थोड़ी सहमी थी कह दूं तो क्या होगा सोचा बहुत रोका सब कुछ रुआसा है धुंधला धुआं सा है लड़ने को दिल रोता पर अब नहीं होता सुन तो लो कुछ नहीं हुआ है सुन तो लो ये तेरा वहम है सुन तो लो सुन तो लो सुन तो लो ठीक लग रही हो सुन तो लो मुस्कुरा के देखो सुन तो लो सुन तो लो. There we go, just a couple lines.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you so much for having me and
Yeah.
for this interview. I really
Thank,
enjoyed it.
yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. Actually, it was a lovely interview.